If you are a fan of Rick Steves, then you know the public television host and travel guru is known for his expertise on a lot of things. The peaceful paths and scenic cliffs along the Scottish Isles, the rich history and vibrant culture of Istanbul, Turkey, and the idyllic hideaways along the Greek islands Santorini, Mykonos, and Rhodes, just to name a few. He's even well-versed in the push for recreational marijuana as a member of the board for NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. But classical music and symphony orchestras don't usually make the list. So when we heard about his upcoming show with the Boston Pops, naturally we had a few questions. Here to answer them ahead of 2 shows with the Pops this week is Rick Steves, the host of Rick Steves Europe, and his radio show Travel with Rick Steves. Rick, thanks for being here.
Nice to be with you.
So who pitched who on this? Did the Pops come to you? Did you go to them?
The Pops came to me, and I was here in Boston giving one of my lectures in the same hall that the Boston Pops performs in. And in the green room, when I was done with my talk, there was a letter on the seat, and it was the creative director of the Boston Pops, and said, "We'd love to have you back to
Very
do
nice.
Apparently, they had watched the show that we produced for public television that aired on WGBH, that we produced in Seattle with my hometown orchestra. And they thought we could do it in Boston. And I thought, sure.
I think we have a little bit of footage, actually, from the Seattle performance. Let's take a look at that.
Our next piece is from Italy, and it evokes the struggles of the Italian-speaking states as they set their sights on independence. The very most popular opera composer was Giuseppe Verdi. His operas were the rage. People would fill the opera houses, they'd stand on their seats, and together they'd sing.
So this is a multimedia thing, right? It's not just straight music. It's a combination of narration, visual imagery, music.
Plus a tour guide that can set the context. That's what I love, because this is what I am as a tour guide. I take people around Europe, and I love music, and I love history, and I love the Romantic era, the nationalism time of the 1800s, and I can weave it all together. And what's really fun for me is I get a minute or two to set up the historic context of each piece, and then we've got images projected from that country while the orchestra plays that beautiful music.
Let me ask you about the nationalism question, because I'm a big fan of this era musically as well.
Right.
I think of the composers who were featured as pretty nationalistic. I'm thinking of Smetana and Wagner, Grieg, others. We are living in the midst of a moment where we're being reminded of the corrosive power of nationalism as well as the creative and productive power of it. Is that something that you have been wrestling with as you put this set of performances with the Pops together?
Yes, it is a complicated thing. And when I originally did this 5 or 6 years ago, it wasn't quite the same issue.
It was almost quaint, right?
Yeah, it was quaint, exactly. I see nationalism in the 1800s as a great thing. I mean, when we were having our Civil War, we were wrestling with the issue, are we one nation or two nations under God? In that same decade, Adam, that we were having our Civil War, Italy was struggling with, should all these Italian-speaking states be one? And Germany was having the same thing. And then in about 1870, we're one nation under God, and Italy is one nation, and Germany is one nation. Norway is distinguishing itself from Sweden, and so on. And that was that in the same generation, all those national questions were being asked. And if I had a teaching mission or a political agenda, it's to get Americans to feel the excitement they feel when they listen to Aaron Copland or listen to the Star Spangled Banner. And then remember, a Norwegian or an Italian would not react to that the same way. But if we went to their country and listened to Grieg or Verdi, the Norwegians and the Italians would get all excited just like we do for Aaron Copland. So especially in the context of the Boston Pops, which is beloved for celebrating American music, we're going to take that emotion and take it on the road and drop down in 7 different countries in Europe.
Let me put you on the spot. This is a philosophical question, but since you've been thinking about this stuff, do you think that you can have the generative power of nationalism, the ability of a sense of national identity to give rise to great works of art, incredible pride on the part of given people? Can you have that without getting the downside, the darker stuff, the hatred of the other? Is that a possibility?
I think it is. I think it takes courageous leadership. I think it takes sort of a people's movements. The 1848, there was people power revolutions all over the place. I think that you have autocrats or wannabe autocrats taking advantage of fear and frustration and combining it with nationalism, and it turns it into an ugly thing. And you can see that. We did a special right here on WGBH that's airing all over the country on fascism. I did a show called Lessons from 20th Century Fascism in Europe, and it talks about how that was used against people in the 1920s and 1930s in Europe. That's an ugly kind of nationalism, and Europe is experiencing that right now, and so are other countries.
You mentioned Europe experiencing that right now. I actually was really curious about whether you, in your travels, as someone who is always traveling through Europe, did you sense that something was shifting prior to Brexit and prior to Viktor Orban and this right-wing government in Italy? Did you have a sense that the ground was moving under your feet?
I sure felt it in Turkey, because I love the fact that Turkey is a secular, pluralistic, Western-looking Muslim nation. And over the last 10 or 12 years, I've seen it creep into fundamentalism and losing its secular pluralism. And all they needed was one 9/11 or one burned Reichstag building or one failed coup, and immediately you've lost your independence. And that's what Turkey experienced after that failed coup with Erdogan.
I would imagine that there are people who like the idea of travel but maybe feel more apprehensive given the moment that we're living in. Do you think that the sort of travel you champion in your programs, is it more important now than it was 5 or 10 years ago?
This is what I do. I used to teach budget travel. Now I teach a talk called Travel as a Political Act. And I travel around I'm 4 months a year in Europe. Europe is my beat. My mission is to inspire and equip people to venture beyond Orlando. We've got to get out there. We're 4% of this planet, but there's 96% out there. Europe is kid stuff. It's the wading pool for world exploration. But you mentioned people might be a little nervous about traveling. That's completely a symptom of watching too much hysterical commercial news. And I spend 4 months a year in Europe. I was just in Belfast last week. I was just in Ethiopia 2 months ago. And I firmly believe it's never been safer to travel than right now. This is totally statistical.
Right.
I know statistics are optional these days in our country, but statistically, it's never been safer to travel, and Europe is statistically far safer than the United States. This is just common sense, but people still say, have a safe trip. If somebody tells me you have a safe trip, I say, you have a safe stay at home, because where I'm going is safer than where you're staying.
So your advice to people is go ahead, get out there, don't sit back.
Don't tell me have a safe trip. Tell me bon voyage.
All right. So to get back to the nitty-gritty, what brought you in here? Yeah. Remind me of the dates of these two performances coming up with the class.
Thursday and Friday. Tomorrow
Thursday
and
and
the
Friday.
Next day.
Tickets are still available.
Tickets are available. I'll be giving a talk beforehand to warm people up. I just love this idea of going on the road with the Boston Symphony and dropping in on 6 or 7 countries, and I get to splice in all these video images, and with all the creative energy and talent of the Boston Pops, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Where are you going to be in Europe?
Where am I going to be? Oh, we're going to, musically, you mean?
Yeah, right.
We're going to Norway, we're going to the Czech Republic, England, Germany, Austria, Italy, and France.
And if people want to catch a preview of this before buying a ticket, it's on your website, right?
If you go to ricksteves.com,
previous your Seattle, Washington.
Thank you. You can look in the TV section and watch any of our shows that have aired on GBH over the years, and that includes Europe, A Symphonic Journey.
All right, Rick Steves, thank you. Good to talk to you. You can catch Rick Steves on stage with the Boston Pops at Symphony Hall again tomorrow and Friday at 8 o'clock.